The first series is in the books. What did we think about the Royals and Twins? We'll talk about it in this edition of Locked On Royals.
You are Locked On Royals, your daily Kansas City Royals podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are tuned into another edition of Locked On Royals on the Locked On Podcast Network. As always, I am your host, Jack Johnson, and you can find me on Twitter or X at JohnnyJ_15. That's at JOHNYJ_15. You also can catch us on wherever you get your podcast. That is Spotify, Apple Podcast, Amazon Music, Google Podcast. We're on Odyssey, and we're on YouTube. Just be sure to hit that follow button and subscribe. If you're a first-time listener, of course, welcome in. We love new listeners here on the Locked On Royals channel. And if you want to know a little bit more about me, I'm based here in Kansas City. I work over at Sports Radio 810 WHB, do some hosting over there once a week, co-hosting a little bit and producing as well. So I stay pretty busy in the sports world, as you know. But when you come to this podcast, you know that you were getting 30 straight minutes of Royals baseball. And today's show is brought to you by FanDuel. We're now in the Final Four of March Madness. Baseball in full swing, the women's NCAA tournament in full swing, of course, NBA in full swing. No better time than to go over to FanDuel and create your account, start winning some money, and use the code that we'll be handing out a little bit later on in today's show. Well, as I was teasing at the beginning of this show, one series is in the books. The Royals lost the opening series to the Minnesota Twins by a 2-3 count. They did grab the finale yesterday, demolishing Minnesota 11-0. And when you look back at this series, as doomsday as it felt in the first two, kind of feel like you wiped away those first two games with the way you played on Sunday. And here is the reality of baseball and what I really wanted to convey to people that were panicking and ready to give up on the team 2 games into the season. Look, I can't, I guess the way I should say is I can't underreact to the first 2 games and then overreact to game 3. So I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to say Sunday's game is really who the Royals are and Thursday and Saturday is not who they are at all. We simply don't know right now. It's so early in the season, but I do think when you walk away from a series against a division rival, division champs, the reigning division champs, I should say, and you outscore them, you get 3 quality starts, and a lot of your young stars were the reason that you played so well on Sunday. I can't say I'm really that disappointed. I mean, think about Minnesota right now. They grabbed 2 of 3. They also lost Royce Lewis. They also couldn't play Max Kepler after opening day. Their bullpen is completely banged up, and they only scored 9 runs in the series. Didn't score any in the finale. So, yeah, they walk away 2-1. And I'm not saying the Royals should be celebrating grabbing just 1 game in a series at home against the reigning division champs. You always want to take 2 of 3. But I think there's a moment in time to just put it into perspective. You know, where these teams are at, where they could be middle of the season, where you're hoping the Royals to be by the end of the year. I mean, it's no secret whatsoever, and we'll talk about this in the final segment today. The bullpen was a big problem for the Royals. In close games and 1-run games, they showed they can't get close. And 2 guys you brought in to be very reliable were awful in the opening series. I thought some guys that gave up runs or battled around some danger, I wasn't too concerned with. John Schreiber being one of them, James McArthur being another. I'm not overly worried. I think we saw in the first 2 games a bullpen that was pressing because they knew they had to be perfect. And I hate to give excuses to guys that really don't deserve excuses for being pitchers from other organizations that had pitched at high levels, that had pitched in the playoffs to, they can't handle a 1-run game on opening day or a 1-run game, game 2 into the season. I don't want to say that, but I walk away going, I really don't expect Will Smith to be that bad. I don't expect Chris Stratton to be that bad. I don't expect James McArthur to give up leads and outings that he has. I don't expect John Schreiber to just completely lose command in an outing. But again, we'll touch on that more in the final segment. of today's episode. I just want to look at the workload for what this team did. And, on Saturday afternoon, a lot of people were reaching out to me and saying, that's it. I'm done with this team. I knew they were going to be terrible. 53 and 109. They're going to lose 100 plus. This offense sucks. And, I'm not going to go back on what I said at the beginning of the year. The last thing I want to do is be a hypocrite in that. But I didn't want to say, well, it's a long season. I didn't want to say, well, they'll figure it out, because the reality is we don't know if they're going to figure it out. Last year, I think I used that approach even before I took over this podcast, because the Royals were hitting the ball incredibly hard. They were just hitting it right at guys. And that offense never really got going, not until very late in the season when they were already over 90 losses. So this team, I just thought a lot of the guys they're counting on are going to be just fine. Michael Garcia is showing more power. Bobby Witt Jr. is looking like an MVP candidate 3 games into the season. I mean, he's got, varsity numbers that a star would have on his high school team, hitting 550 something. Nearly could have had the cycle. He struck out in his last 2 plate appearances, but had a home run, a triple, and a single in the first 3 innings yesterday. I mean, he's been hitting the ball incredibly hard. He looked great in the last 2 games of the series. Didn't look bad in game 1. Just had a fortunate bloop and then walked in that game. So he's been on twice, or at least twice, in all 3 games of the series. And I thought MJ Melendez looked really good. I had some people that didn't want me to be too positive about MJ, but I think you also have to look at where he was last year to begin the year and the start that he's had this year. It's 3 games. I'm not going to overreact to it. I'm not going to say my prediction's right because of 3 games, but this is the type of series he needed for people to go, okay, let's take some heat and pressure off of him. He started better than Vinny Pasquantino. He started better than Hunter Renfroe. He started better than Salvador Perez. Salvy's another one, right? We were answering Mailbag Friday questions, and I had people questioning if Salvador Perez should still be behind the plate for the Royals, if they should go to Freddie Fermin full time. And Salvy has a 3-hit day yesterday, a 3-run home run, was scorching the ball. It's not that he's fixed. It's not that he's much better now. It's that you just can't pull a 2-game sample size and say a guy is bad or good. You hope that they start hot, but you can't really make a firm prediction off of who somebody is after 1 series. I don't think Vinny Pasquantino is going to be terrible this year because he only had 1 hit in the series. It's 1 series. And also keep in mind with this, and why even in the first 2 games of the Baltimore series, the Royals offense is going to get some relief by who they're facing. They get Dean Kramer tonight, and they get Cole Irvin on Tuesday night, and they get Corbin Burns on Wednesday. Then they get a putrid White Sox rotation for a 4-game set. They faced 3 really good arms for Minnesota. 3 really good arms. Pablo Lopez, Cy Young candidate. Joe Ryan, Royals have never been able to hit him, and in the first half, he's usually very, very good. Curious what he's going to look like in the second half, because in his career, it hasn't been very good. And then Bailey Ober, people were trying to tell me Bailey Ober wasn't good yesterday because he got demoted to AAA last year for a small portion of time. He had 26 starts last year, a sub-3.5 ERA. His whip was below league average. He struck out over 9 guys per 9, walked less than 2 guys per 9. Got a big inning workload, big sample size. Like, in his career, he's not really struggled. Like, Bailey Ober is a good pitcher. And I had people saying, well, he was bad against the Royals last year. Okay, some guys don't have their number. But the Royals tagged him for 8 runs in less than 2 innings. That was good for the offense. They weren't lighting up the White Sox rotation. You hope that for next week. But it's like you can't really give yourself a ribbon or put yourself on a pedestal for raking against that White Sox rotation because they just don't have a lot of great arms. Minnesota does. Minnesota is built off their rotation, and that's why the games looked the way they did in games 1 and games 2. Royals could have easily walked away taking 2 of 3 in this one. The bullpen blew it on Saturday, but they also were relying on the Royals to hold off a good Minnesota offense with only a 1-run lead. I think you can take a step back and say the Royals outscored Minnesota. They got 3 quality starts. Reagan's had the worst start of all 3 of them. Brady Singer looked phenomenal through his 4-seam 14 times yesterday. Seth Lugo, as advertised, that's exactly what the Royals want him to do. He had 17 quality starts last year, quality start and 6 shutout innings in his first outing as a Royal, and Cole Reagans looked dominant on opening day. Now you pass the ball over to Michael Wacha tonight, and this is why you got Michael Wacha, to build off of a great start. You're on the road. Best team last year in the American League. Young, talented, loaded offense. Turn it over to a veteran. And then we'll see what Alec Marsh looks like on Tuesday night. And then we get a potential Cy Young matchup in Corbin Burns and Cole Reagans on Wednesday afternoon. We have fun series in Baltimore, but after what I saw against Minnesota, I think if you take one against the Orioles, I feel good at 2-4, taking on the White Sox and the Astros for the upcoming homestand. What did you think of the first series of the year of the Kansas City Royals? Let us know in the YouTube comments and let us know on Twitter when I post this out under @JohnnyJ_15. Okay, the next segment I want to dive into is this pitching. The starting rotation looked dominant, was pleased with Reagans, really pleased with Lugo, and floored by Brady Singer. We're going to dive into all of that next on Locked On Royals. You are tuned into Locked On Royals on the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jack Johnson. Please give me a follow on Twitter @JohnnyJ_15. That's @JOHNYJ_15. Before we go any further, want to give a shout out to one of the sponsors today and the title sponsor today in FanDuel. The sports calendar is loaded, and FanDuel's making it even more exciting to get in on the action. Because right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $200 you can use to bet on the tournament, MLB, NBA, NHL, and so much more. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and make your first bet a big win. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. And if you are contemplating on getting into the baseball betting world, I'll try every once in a while later on in the season to give you some good over-under bets just for single game scenarios with the Royals. Maybe for other games that may not pertain to Kansas City. It can always be fun with the futures bets. Who's going to win the Cy Young? Who's going to win the MVP? Maybe you throw some money down on Bobby Witt Jr. after the first series that he had, but that's your money, and I'm not going to try to push you anyway with that. So again, use that code of Locked On MLB when you are signing up. So a big deal that they're running over there. You've probably already done it. If you listen to this podcast long enough, you're probably already signed up with FanDuel. So what I'm going to do is just say, keep betting money, keep winning money. That's what I should probably say. Keep winning money, not keep betting money, because I don't want you to lose any money when going over to FanDuel. But I know that's pretty impossible for a lot of people, including myself. I really do struggle with winning some money from time to time. And we also want to give a shout out to the other sponsor today in LinkedIn. Are you struggling to close deals? And that's why I want to tell you about LinkedIn Sales Navigator. LinkedIn Sales Navigator is a sales intelligence platform that helps professionals effectively prospect and engage high-value customers, drive higher revenue, and increase sales performance. Sales Navigator helps you target the right buyers, surface key signals such as job changes or which accounts you should prioritize, and shows you hidden allies so you can find those buyers that are most likely to convert. Right now, you can try LinkedIn Sales Navigator and get a 60-day free trial at linkedin.com/lockedon. That is linkedin.com/lockedon for a free 60-day trial. Let LinkedIn Sales Navigator help you sell like a superstar today. Just go to linkedin.com/lockedon and get started. It was hard not to be pleased with what you saw from the rotation in the opening series of 2024. The Royals went toe-to-toe with great starters on the Twins side, and I thought really held their own. And I thought in two of those starts, I might even say all three of those starts, to be honest with you, the Royals looked better. The Royals starters looked better. Even though Pablo Lopez went longer and gave up less runs than Reagans, I thought Reagans looked more electric. That's biased, though. So I will give the nod to Pablo Lopez, but I thought Reagans overall got more swing and miss, looked more overpowering, and it was two bad pitches that got away from him. Royce Lewis homered off him. Carlos Correa had a RBI double that where the 2 runs were charged to Cole Reagans. Lugo was better than Joe Ryan. Lugo had 6 shutout. Believe Joe Ryan got into the 6th inning, maybe just past us and a little bit into the 7th inning, but he gave up a run. He had the 2-out RBI single to MJ Melendez, so I'll give the nod to Lugo. Even though Joe Ryan, kind of like with the Reagans deal, looked a little bit more electric, Lugo had the better line. So Lopez looked better in game 1. Thought Lugo looked better in game 2. And then game 3, not close. Brady Singer with 7 shutout innings, the best start of any Royal over the weekend. He had 10 strikeouts as well. He was using his new pitch a little bit. He threw the four seam 14 times. The slider was working. The sinker was working and was very efficient. I thought there was one moment in the game where I thought this would be last year Brady Singer if it goes the opposite way. And it was first and second. He had Ryan Jeffers up at the plate, and he ended up getting out of that frame, getting him to ground out to Bobby Witt Jr. After that, the Royals gave him an 8-9 run cushion, and it was over. And he was able to cruise the rest of the way. But also, that's where I have to tip my cap and say how important it is. When you have a big cushion, some guys get too laxed, and then they start giving up runs, and then you have to turn to the bullpen earlier than you would like. Brady Singer just took the ball and kept getting quick outs. And he had a lot of single-digit pitch innings. He had a ton of strikeouts. He had, from time to time, a favorable zone, but the Twins had that the day before. The umpiring was not very good in this series. And Brady Singer's stuff looked really good. His velocity was up a little bit, and we talked about that in the offseason, about Brady Singer's velocity being a big part of him returning to the 2022 form. But I think he really needed that. And what gets lost in a series loss is that pressure on the game 3 starter. And when the Royals looked so good, pitching-wise, starting pitching-wise, in game 1 and game 2, the offense couldn't give him much. Brady Singer's probably going in that game thinking, I got to be just as good as they were because I don't know how many runs I'm going to get. And fortunately for him, he got a 3-run cushion before he could even take the mound in the second inning. And when he got that cushion, I think we saw that confident 2022 form. Not so much the 2023 form that was just want to get through this. Just want to make sure I don't get too knocked around. That this lead can stay intact. Then I can turn it over to the bullpen. I think we wanted to see Brady Singer in an environment where you had to rip the ball from him to get him out of that game. He looked fired up. He looked confident, and that's huge. Keep in mind, for your number 4 starter, all right, you go around baseball yesterday. You go through everybody's number 4 starter. How many of them had 7 shutout innings with 10 strikeouts? It's one start. But that's the upside. That's what Brady Singer could be at his best. I think that's the best Brady Singer can look. And that's the best a lot of guys can look in Major League Baseball. 7 shutout, 2 hits, 10 Ks. You can't pitch much better than that. And like with Seth Lugo didn't rack up the strikeouts, but he's not a strikeout pitcher. We saw a couple of times, his defense bail him out. MJ Melendez had a big play on Saturday. Bobby Witt Jr. had some big plays. Michael Garcia as well. But he throws strikes. He pitches to contact. He was very efficient. He had 86 pitches through shutout innings. That's Seth Lugo. That's Seth Lugo at his best. Cole Reagans, the good thing is, that's actually not him at his best. Him at his best is 7, 8 complete innings, double-digit strikeouts, 1 run or less. That's why you can feel good about it. And for Michael Wacha tonight, I'm excited to see what Michael Wacha can bring you against a loaded and really good lineup. Like I said, there's going to be people that overreact to the Baltimore series. If they get swept, back to square one. That's your 1-5, and you don't feel that good about the team. But it's a good task for this rotation. First 3 guys, you can't complain. You just can't. They've been that good. Now, the bullpen, different story, and we're about to talk about them in the final segment today. But it is impossible to nitpick what the rotation did wrong in the first 3 games of the year. They're not going to look like that every single time out, but the Royals paid Seth Lugo to look like that. The Royals made Cole Reagans the race to look like that. Now, I said Brady Singer was the number 4 starter. I know in the first time through, he technically is the number 4 starter. I still view him as the number 4 starter because I think Michael Wacha is the number 3. They just wanted Wacha to throw on the road. So maybe I have to walk back that statement. How many number 3 starters yesterday or across Major League Baseball had 7 shutout innings with 10 Ks? Maybe one of them did that I missed, but I didn't really see anybody else other than Brady Singer, who also had the most or tied for the most swings and misses yesterday with 19. It was a dominant electric performance. Royals are 1-2. Desperately needed that one yesterday. Okay, before we move on to that bullpen segment, want to give a shout out to Locked On Sports Today. You can make the switch to Locked On Sports Today, a free 24/7 sports streaming channel programmed for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all the screaming. Locked On Sports Today brings you can't miss analysis, opinions, and news streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Well, contrary to the rotation, the bullpen was not good whatsoever in that series against Minnesota. Am I concerned or am I laid back about it? We'll find out next on Locked On Royals. You are tuned into Locked On Royals on the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jack Johnson. Give me a follow on Twitter at JohnnyJ_15 and give us a follow on wherever you get your podcasts. Spotify, Apple Podcast, Amazon Music, Google Podcasts. We're on Odyssey and we're on YouTube. Just hit that subscribe button as well. Before we go any further, I want to give a shout out to the last sponsor today in Amazon Fire TV. Fire TV is your destination for sports, from live games to highlights to in-depth analysis. Fire TV offers amazing viewing experiences with smart TVs, as well as the Fire TV stick that you can plug into your existing TV that provides access to millions of movies and TV episodes, as well as free and live TV. Whether it's opening weekend for baseball or the college basketball tournament, you're going to want to have a Fire TV. Well, this is the negative aspect to the Royals taking only one of 3 games against the Minnesota Twins. Is you can look back and you can find areas in which the Royals could have maybe grabbed 2. I think 2 is the likely scenario because they actually had a lead going into the 8th inning in Saturday's game. And James McArthur, in my opinion, your most reliable bullpen arm, was bitten by a bad pitch. Eduardo Julian had the leadoff double. And then Byron Buxton had the little bouncer over Michael Garcia. That tied the game. And then Will Smith had the floodgates open up, and he gave 4 runs in the 9th inning. And Chris Stratton kind of did the same thing on opening day. He gave up 2 runs when they were just trying to keep the game close and give the Royals a chance going into the bottom of the 9th inning. You know, I would say the guys that they've put in, the guys they've signed and brought in, have not looked good so far. Chris Stratton does not look good. John Schreiber didn't give up a run, but he hit 2 batters. He gave up a hit. He did get a big double play to get out of that inning and keep the lead intact, but it's not what John Schreiber's supposed to be for the team. James McArthur, though you got him last year, I thought the stuff looked really good. He was missing his location, though. And that's how Julian was able to hit that leadoff double. I think it was Salvi that wanted it down and in, and he missed high and away. And that just led right into the bat path, and it was hit hard. And you credit the hitter to punishing a mistake. And then Will Smith looked really, really bad. And I'm not going to make any excuses for that. His stuff did not look overpowering enough, and I knew that. I knew that Will Smith was not going to be an overpowering arm, but you felt like the curveball was going to play. You felt like he was going to be able to locate his fastball, which sits in the low 90s. But I'll be honest, I questioned a little bit that the Royals right now view him as their closer because I look at this Baltimore series. I mean, think about tonight. If the Royals go into the bottom of the 9th up 3-2, are you turning to Will Smith? I would be a little bit anxious about that. I would be nervous just because of what I saw in that first game. But I also understand that you don't abandon the closer role after one bad outing. I think it was just an off outing. And the Royals bullpen also struggled with hitting guys. Hitting guys was a really frustrating aspect of that first series. And a lot of them were barely grazing the Twins hitters. It almost just felt like a matter of luck. Now, they were missing too close to Twins hitters, but they were getting hit on the jerseys, like barely running by and just clipping them. And that would put a leadoff guy on, or that would put 2 runners on. And then you found yourself in a spot where you're trying to battle out of it and dance out of it against very good hitters. I am curious, once things settle down, how they are going to start orchestrating this bullpen. Because they have some arms they can use down in Omaha. Will Klein can be that overpowering arm. They're still working Carlos Hernandez back. John McMillan's velocity's down, and he did not look good in his first outing of the year for the Storm Chasers. So that does concern me a little bit. I didn't think that his injury would linger this much, or maybe it was a weird offseason. But John McMillan's a guy who can change that bullpen. But, what I go back to is the Royals signed these guys. These are proven guys. Last year, there weren't many proven guys in the bullpen. If guys on minor league deals or rookies were getting lit up, it probably was because they weren't very good. Now, Chris Stratton, John Schreiber, Nick Anderson, Will Smith, James MacArthur, these are all proven guys. MacArthur's actually not that proven. He just was really good at the tail end of last year. Like, these are all guys you should be able to count on to bounce back. And I do think some of these guys will bounce back. Not all of them. That's just the way baseball goes. Sometimes you're going to have a bullpen arm that you bring in, doesn't work out. It just never really looks that good. I think my money would be on, after the first series, it's hard not to think, Will Smith maybe just reaching the end of his career isn't going to have the stuff. But he's also very, very groomed to pitch in big games. He's won 3 straight World Series with 3 different teams. The numbers haven't been overpowering, but he's pitched in much bigger games than what he pitched in on Saturday. And that gives me confidence and gives me hope that he can figure this out. And we can't pass judgment really on anything after 3 games. You can feel good about certain areas and concerned about other ones. But to me, at the end of the day, it's a spot really where I'm okay with it struggling early on, because I feel like it is going to get better. Like, the rotation, if they struggled, I honestly still would have felt fine. It's like those are guys that are going to turn things around. The offense, I would have been a little bit more concerned with if they didn't play well yesterday, going, wow, that's 3 straight games, and they were just walked all over. They just got dominated by good pitching, and they're going to face good pitching this year. The bullpen, I kind of lump in together with the rotation. There's more proven guys than last year. There's guys with good stuff, and I think once they find their footing, and maybe once they can come into spots where it's a 3-run cushion or a 4-run cushion, you built up that confidence then to work yourself toward holding that 1-run cushion. It's going to happen this year. The Royals are going to have spots, and maybe even in this series, where they only hold on to a 1-run lead in the final 3 innings, and they got to trust 3 guys to get 9 outs. That's going to be the big question early on until they can do it, because right now, nobody's confident in them. Nobody's confident in pretty much anybody. And here's another bad fact. I believe every single pitcher that came out of the bullpen in the Twin Series did not have a 1-2-3 inning. Every single one of them dealt with a base runner. And that's alarming. Even though it's 3 games, it's some of these guys need to come in and just do their job. Low pitch count, work out of it, pitch to contact, use your defense, move on. And nobody could do it. Nobody looked good enough in that opening series. But you can't walk away from one series and say the bullpen sucks, all these guys are bad, you need to DFA all of them. It's not the way it's going to go. They're going to get a good opportunity in this Baltimore series to hold down some leads. I think that Michael Wacha and Cole Reagans, knock on wood here, maybe Wacha gets lit up or Reagans gets lit up, but those are 2 guys that can pitch well enough to put the Royals in a spot to hold a lead late. Alec Marsh, toss-up. Don't really know. But those are 2 of the pitchers you really want in a series like this. Now, for the bullpen, I'm sure they take a lot of pride in being a good back end of the bullpen. And I said it, if the Royals are going to get to the level we all want them to be, you can't do it with a bad bullpen. The Royals can have a great rotation, good offense. They have a bad bullpen. They're not going to win anywhere from 78 to 85 games. It's not going to happen. They have to have a good bullpen, because there are going to be nights where this offense can only give them 2 or 3 runs. And maybe their pitchers, their starters, can get through 6 or 7, only giving up 1 or 2. And you got to be able to rely and trust guys to hold on to that lead. In the first series of the year, they could not do that. They weren't even close to doing that. But they're going to be tested again against a very good offense coming up in this 3-game set against the Baltimore Orioles. Well, that's going to do it for another edition of Locked On Royals on the Locked On Podcast Network. I've been your host, Jack Johnson. Be sure to give me that follow on Twitter at JohnnyJ_15. Before we say goodbye, one last shout out to Locked On Sports Today. It's here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Find Locked On Sports Today now, available on the free Fire TV Channels app. Tomorrow, we're going to recap a little bit of that Game 1 between Baltimore and Kansas City, if they actually play tonight. I know the weather's not looking that great for this series, but we'll talk about all of that in our opening segment, and maybe a little bit more in the Bobby Witt Jr.'s hot start and Michael Garcia's power. But until then, you take it easy, Kansas City.